Hello again. I am so pleased that you're here at the Eating Disorder Hope online conference, Anorexia, Hope and Healing in 2018. Our next presentation is by a wonderful woman who is such an inspiration to the entire global eating disorder community. Her name is Kirsten Haglund. She served as Miss America in 2008 and is now proud to be the Community Relations Specialist for Timberline Knolls Residential Treatment Center. She's also an ambassador for the National Eating Disorder Association. As a television personality and commentator, Kirsten appears frequently on Fox News, HLN, Fox Business Network, and Huffington Post, or Huff Post, I think they're called now, live, to comment on women's health issues, celebrity culture, social issues, women's empowerment, and the millennial generation. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Kirsten Haglund, who will be presenting tips and guidance on long-term eating disorder recovery.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline. And I want to say a big hello to everyone who's joining us today. Thank you so much for being a part of this online conference. Obviously, one of the benefits of the internet is that we can have the benefit of listening to such incredible presentations, and I feel really honored to be a part of this day without leaving the comfort of our own homes. I'd also just like to let all of you know where I'm joining you from. For the last 6 years, I've lived in New York City, but just recently I've relocated to Zurich in Switzerland. So I am coming to you live from the most neutral country on earth, which is a really nice place to be when you tie the analogy back to eating disorder thinking and black and white thinking. It's really nice to be living in a gray area, I guess you could say. So it's exciting to be here. It's part of what I'm trying to do in expanding the outlook and advocacy of eating disorders awareness and prevention, not only in the United States, but all over the world. As I'm sure many of you know who are listening, you've experienced the fact that we're not just isolated to our own communities, that this is a global problem, and that eating disorders affect people no matter their age, their race, their gender, their cultural background, their socioeconomic status, their religious background. It's something that's become more and more prevalent, and to me, over the last several years. And everywhere that I go, everywhere that I travel, doesn't matter if it's a small village in Rwanda or the Middle East, or speak at the UN, or here in very affluent cultures in Europe, or even refugee communities. People struggle with eating disorders all over the world in any situation. And what I draw from that is always that means that there need to be people who are speaking up about this issue, that are sharing their own stories of recovery, so people don't feel alone, that they feel that they have access to resources, even if it's just a person to listen to them and to validate their experience, that it's real, and try to get them the help and the care that they need. So that's an exciting little update and gives you a window into where I'm coming to you from. So really great to be talking about this topic today, and I feel excited to do so. It's tips and guidance for long-term anorexia recovery. And as many of you probably know, I've shared my story on Eating Disorder Hope many times before, and in speaking engagements. I am someone who has personally recovered from an eating disorder. I battled anorexia myself as a teenager, and that's the space from which I'm coming to you with some of my thoughts and insights, as well as things that I have learned over the last decade or so in my advocacy work, and hearing the stories of many, many other incredible survivors of this disease, as well as from many of the clinicians who are speaking here today. So really excited to dive into that. I'm not going to go in depth into my story because a lot of you have heard it many times, but I started to struggle when I was about 12 years old. My parents got me into treatment when I was 15, 16 years old, and got into really great outpatient treatment in the Metro Detroit area for 2 good solid years before I was at a place where my doctors were like, all right, you're set and ready to move on. Of course, having the tools in your tool belt, so to speak, to go out and face the rest of the world. But that being said, I think that the whole reason that we're talking about long-term recovery is because there is the fact that you can struggle with something in your teenage years, or a season in life in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, doesn't matter. And you have things that come up again later in your life. Different seasons bring different challenges. And so it's necessary to ask yourself and work on with your treatment team, of course, how do I build a foundation in treatment so that I can have recovery that lasts? And that leads us to another question, and it's one that I was confronted with as soon as I went to my first eating disorder conference, which was the National Eating Disorders Association conference, actually. I was 18 years old, and I went as a volunteer just because I wanted to soak up as much information and as community as possible. And I had this question on my mind as someone who was just recently out of outpatient treatment, and asked a lot of different people, is full recovery possible? And it's astounding that that is still a question within the eating disorder community, whether it's anorexia, bulimia, binge eating disorder, or a combination of many different angles of all of those. It's still a question that's asked, and it's still one where you hear a wide variety of different opinions from people with much, much more clinical and academic experience than myself. And it's one that people differ on quite a bit. I have been fortunate enough to have some really great mentors in the eating disorder community who have their own stories of recovery and have written books and speaking and all of that. And they all have different opinions on this as well. To what extent is someone completely free from an eating disorder for the rest of their life? And alternatively, from people who are struggling in the midst of it, there's also this tension between what is the more hopeful message? Is it more hopeful to hear when you're in the depths of the struggle and the despair and that darkest moment? Is it hopeful to hear, yes, there will be a day when this is completely gone, when you are free from every thought, you are completely normal again? There is lasting freedom. Is it more hopeful to hear that? Or is it more hopeful to tell someone who is in the struggle and the grind of therapy, to say, who might be working toward that ultimate goal of having zero eating disorder thoughts ever for their entire life again, and having that seem like that goal is constantly so far away that they can never reach it, that you feel defeated and like you'll never get there and it's not possible for you, so you give up and say, I'm going to be stuck with this the rest of my life. I can't ever achieve that freedom. Is that a defeating thought? And I have heard opinions on both sides of the spectrum and everywhere in between from people who are in recovery themselves at that moment. I can tell you what was most hopeful for me, and that was hearing that I could be truly free from this disease. And what that meant to me from the mentors of mine that I heard it from, and how they modeled that to me, total freedom, was not that they didn't have bad days. It wasn't that they never felt anxious or depressed again. It wasn't that they didn't wake up some days not liking a certain body part, or being like, oh, I'm having a horrible hair day, or I feel just really inadequate about myself going into this meeting or this, coffee with a friend, or whatever it may be. It's not that there weren't difficult thoughts, and it's not that there weren't times when there was a temptation in the back of their mind to say, if you give into the eating disorder, if you go back to these behaviors, if you restrict again, then you'll feel better. It's not that that voice was never there. It's that the emotions, the response to them, and the presence of a stronger thought that, yes, if I go back to that, then I will A, die, I will be worse, C, it will not be the solution to whatever struggle or challenge I'm going through right now, that healthy self was much more powerful than any little thought that would pop up in the back of the brain. And so they remained eating disorder behavior free, or anorexia behavior free. And so that is what I believe. I believe that that is completely 100% possible. I know it too because I experience it in my daily life. That is the freedom that I experience. That I know that I'm not going back to the anorexic behaviors because I have held on to that. I still, in the pit of my stomach, know what that feeling was like, to feel completely at the end of myself in the darkest moment of my eating disorder. I still can feel it in my gut. I know what it feels like. And I know that that is not compatible, that it is not possible to live in that space and to go back to that space and also do everything else that I truly want to do in my life. That is very, very strong. So while I have absolutely bad days, and I have bad stretches of days, I have challenging seasons, and I have times where I feel like there's nothing I can do to contain the anxiety or whatever it might be. But I know that going back to the eating disorder behaviors is not the answer. And that voice is stronger. And that healthy self, thank God, is stronger than the eating disorder voice. And so I believe that that kind of freedom, that kind of long-term recovery from anorexia is absolutely possible. Unfortunately, because of lack of access to care, because of stigma, because of a whole host of reasons, it still remains about 1/3 of people with anorexia, with an eating disorder, actually get treatment and do go on to recover. But I believe that with talking about this more, with legislation, with increased advocacy, with increased awareness, that number is going to be higher. But still, to this day, this question, is long-term recovery, can someone achieve full freedom from an eating disorder? Is that possible? Is a question that is still tossed around by some of the most educated and qualified experts. And I think that ultimately it points to the fact that this is such an individual issue, and everyone has a very, very different experience when it comes to how recovery from an eating disorder affects them and affects the rest of their life. But I do want to give people hope that I do believe that freedom is possible. So what does that look like? I wanted to give you, and I created a little outline of about 3 main points that I want to walk through. And one has like 3 sub-points if you're taking notes. But 3 main points to talk about how to establish a foundation for and then continue to maintain long-lasting recovery over a lifetime. And I realize that I need to have a lot of humility when I say this, because I'm 29 years old. And so I'm not 69 years old. I don't have that kind of sage wisdom, but I'm a good listener, and I try to learn as much and gain as much wisdom from my betters as I possibly can. And I can tell you what's worked in my experience and what my mentors' experiences have been. So that is what I'm going to share with you. The first big point is to find a sense of self-worth outside of or beyond your eating disorder. And that, I think, is the thing when working on a recovery that is the most important thing. Just my opinion, but it's one of the most important things in my view. Why? Because an eating disorder is, especially anorexia, because of its ritualism, it becomes like a religion. It becomes this fortress that you build around yourself. For whatever reason, everyone's reasons are different, for control, for safety, for security, for significance, whatever it may be, but it becomes a fortress. And if you think of a wall with 8 feet thick of stone, and the more time that is spent putting stones into that wall, into that fortress, the harder and firmer and stronger and more deeply rooted that wall is going to be around you and around your heart. That being said, why, if you've built that around yourself and you're safe? Well, anyone who comes down and tries to knock down that wall is going to be perceived as an enemy, right? Because they are stripping away the foundation of the identity you've created for yourself in the eating disorder, which ultimately is based on lies. It's based on lies about who you are. It's based upon lies about what you can achieve and what you can accomplish. It's based on lies about your dignity and your value and your intrinsic worth as a human being. It's based on falsehoods and lies. But how do we find an identity outside of it? Especially if you've spent so long building up this fortress out, around yourself, the fortress that is the eating disorder, that is perceived safety. How do you find an identity outside of that? Well, that is obviously what the recovery process is for. For me personally, I built my kind of fortress of my anorexic experience around my identity as a ballet dancer. Because for me, remaining thin and remaining looking like a ballet dancer, that became my entire identity. That's why one of the main reasons why I started to struggle. And it was a huge part of keeping me in that struggle. I didn't know who I was outside of being a ballet dancer. I had absolutely no clue what my gifts were, what my skills were. I didn't think that I had any outside of being a ballerina. And I got tons of positive reinforcement and positive feedback based on that. But in the process of working with my therapist, I realized that I could not stay in that world and be healthy. So I had to start to withdraw. And that took time, and it took a lot of tears and a lot of hard work and a lot of support of my family and friends and a really amazing treatment team. But I started to explore other things that I enjoyed. And at first it took a while to figure out what I enjoyed, but I started to pursue other things. I really loved history. I really loved to read. I really loved to write. I also loved to sing and to do drama. And so I started to pursue some of those other things, both in my studies as well as in the arts, to try to figure out what else I could do, what else I was good at to start. Second of all, I replugged in back to my faith. And obviously everyone's spiritual walk looks different and everyone comes to those issues in a different way. But for me, I was raised as a Christian and for a long time had rejected my Bible, and God was just kind of up there in the sky and he didn't really have a personal relationship with me or really cared very much. But I had a really good girlfriend who recommended a book to me about what it means to be a woman, especially through the eyes of God and how much he has a unique love for women, and how they're created in such beautiful, special, unique ways to give so much to this earth. And that just like opened my eyes completely. And I dove back into my Bible and I started reading the Psalms and just such beautiful literature that spoke to me about who I was as a daughter of God. And that was hugely formational as well in giving me an identity outside of the eating disorder. I realized that I was of value and of worth outside of what my body looked like. I realized that I had other skills besides ballet, that I actually was smart and I enjoyed other things, that I could be good at other things. That was a huge revelation to me. But it was slowly through this process of exploring, well supported, as well as developing my own spiritual walk and taking my thoughts, my cares, my concerns, my prayers, my worries to something bigger than myself, that helped me to get out of this fleshly body and the very physical experience of an eating disorder and discover that there was so much more to me than just my body and to just the sensual, to just the sensations or what I looked at in the mirror. And that once I discovered that, no one could take it away from me. And so I would encourage, especially for those of you that are watching this who are going through recovery right now, or are weighing going to treatment, or are still in the midst of this disease, I want to encourage you that you do have a sense of purpose and a sense of worth beyond the eating disorder. That once it's gone and out of your life and you don't struggle with the behaviors anymore, you are worth more. You are even more valuable. That there is a you on the other side, and it's worth the hard work to get there. So start to explore and start to ask yourself and think about, what else do I enjoy? What else do I love? Ask for feedback from trusted friends and family. What do I do? Who am I? What characteristics do I have that make you smile, that you see that are beautiful in me, that have nothing to do with my body? Talk about it with your therapist. Engage in that conversation, because only once you discover and really know deep in yourself that you have a sense of self-worth outside of the eating disorder, until you do that, it is so incredibly hard to put one foot in front of the other in recovery, because you still have that fortress up. But I swear that once it comes down, there is a whole beautiful green country of possibility that awaits, and you are so incredibly worth that hard work of bringing down those walls. The second big point in how to maintain a long-term recovery, and this is the one that has those 3 sub-points, after finding a sense of self-worth, is expect challenges. I think one of the things that, especially for those of us who have struggled with and recovered from anorexia, there's a lot of black and white thinking, a lot of rigidity in our thinking, and a lot of perfectionism, let's be honest. I mean, I am still a recovering perfectionist, but it's interesting, like my perfectionism only comes out in certain ways, and other ways I'm just totally woohoo all over the place. And you know, people will say, you're so not a perfectionist. You're like, yeah, I don't make my room every morning, and my bathroom is like not the cleanest, but I'm a perfectionist in other ways. So there's a lot of that kind of rigidity and perfectionism. And I think a lot of times we can transfer that from our eating disorder behaviors to recovery. Okay, I wanted to be perfect in my eating disorder, now I want to be perfect in recovery. And there's can be a lot of negative self-talk and blame on ourselves if we don't feel like we're living perfectly recovered every single day, or that if there is a challenge or you hear the eating disorder voice that you've completely failed in recovery. Well, first of all, that's absolutely not true. Second of all, we should absolutely expect failure, expect a relapse on a various, a wide variety of the spectrum. Who defines exactly what relapse is? Well, a clinician can give you a very clinical diagnosis, but a lot of times, sometimes for you, even if you're just feeling like you're tempted to go back in that direction, you can think, oh, that's a relapse for me. For everyone, it's a little bit different, but expect challenges, especially when a new season of life comes up. So I struggled when I was 12 to 15 years old and spent 2 years in outpatient treatment. Then I became Miss America, huge life challenge. It was obviously a really great blessing as well, but it was really, really, really hard. Then I had to transition back into going to school, a really difficult season. I was 22 years old and older than all the rest of my classmates, and starting a completely new, different major, huge, challenging season. Then I got married at 23, also a new challenge. Moved to New York City and started working in television news and media, big challenge. And then just recently, I ended a 5-year, very, very difficult marriage and am recently divorced. Another huge, big challenge. Life does not stop for any of us. All of us are busy. All of us have triumphs and successes and joys in our life, as well as bitter failures. That is a part of life. And you know what? I may get married again. I may have children one day. I'm traveling right now. Who knows? I want to travel all over the world. I want to learn a new language. There's so many things and seasons of life that I'll go through. Middle age, menopause. You never know what kind of physical challenges life will bring. For men and women that are older, then they go through a season of life where they're transitioning maybe into empty nest, maybe into retirement, whether that's a good thing or, oh gosh, I wish I was still working. Life does not stop. Even for those who are healthy, we sometimes wear blinders to the fact that we think that life is going to be easy. It's not. Challenges arise. So what are we going to do, and how are we going to be proactive? For those of us who have put the hard work into recovery, how are we going to be proactive in making sure that those challenges do not derail us into a very serious relapse, so that we can continue to honor the work that we did in recovery? Here's where the 3 subpoints come in. And these are kind of daily practices that I think are really, really important, so that when we do have those challenges, we can be prepared, so that they don't derail us as much as they could if we were not prepared. I'm big on preparation, by the way. I think being proactive is very, very important. I talk about it a lot on my blogs, as well as on these Facebook Lives and online conferences. So you'll hear that a lot from me. So how can we be proactive? The first one, and I talked a little bit about this already, is rejecting rigidity. This has been hugely, hugely, hugely helpful in my life. Rigidity is one of those things that is more consistent with anorexia nervosa, atypical anorexia, which I don't even like that word atypical, because what is a typical eating disorder? Everyone's experience is so different. But for those kind of personality types, rigidity is often a huge problem. It was one of the biggest things that my therapist worked with me on in my initial round of treatment, which I still have a therapist, by the way. I've had lots of therapists over the last 10 years, and I highly, highly recommend them for anyone, even if your initial recovery and treatment is over. Always good to have a therapist and have them on hand at any time in life. But it's one of the things that I initially worked on as a teenager was my rigidity and my schoolwork and so many other little things that had nothing to do with my eating disorder behavior. Just rigidity controlled my life, my schedule, my routine, my ritualism, whether it was food or my schedule or my routine before I went to bed, or any number of things. Everything was ruled by rules. And of course, not all rules are bad, and routine or a schedule can sometimes be a very good thing. But I think for those of us who've struggled with this in the past, rigidity can be a real source of anxiety. And so what I have tried to do is put in place, number one, either people or things in my life where I'm constantly pushed to be more spontaneous and to go with the flow. And that is really, really hard. Just a little story I want to share with you. So a couple days ago, and one of the things that has been a real joy of my own recovery process is coming to have a really healthy relationship with exercise again. Because of the ballet, I used to over-exercise a lot, and now I enjoy my body and I love to exercise, but I also love to take days off and take breaks. And there are many days in a row where I won't go and I won't work out because my body doesn't feel like it, but I just love how in tune that I have come to be with that now, so I can enjoy exercise in a healthy way. So just the other day, I was with a friend biking right around the area where I'm living right now in Switzerland, and we went up into the mountains. And this was the first time I'd really been biking in the mountains. And we are going and enjoying the trails, and it's so beautiful and everything. And we go up a big hill, and it was really hard, and it was a good challenge. And, then we go down, and then we're going up another hill. So like on the third hill, I stopped and I started to get frustrated because like I'm in pretty good shape. Like I'm in okay shape, like heart wise. But I was starting to get like, my brain was going, okay, what's the plan? How long is the route? When are we going to go back? How many more hills are this? How long have we been going? How much longer are we going to be going? Like my brain started to do this, and I started to get frustrated because and so I totally started to remove myself from enjoying the scenery and enjoying the ride to how many more hills are there? Am I going to have to reserve my energy? Like I really just want to know how much longer we're going to go, if I'm going to be happy and enjoy this. And just my brain started to go like this. And I talked to my friend about, who knows me very well. And they were like, doesn't matter. Like, just enjoy it. Just enjoy yourself. And that was not really what I wanted to do in that moment. I wanted to know. I wanted to know just because I wanted to know. And I just had to smile and laugh at myself and be like, yeah, I should be so incredibly grateful. And I was. And just chill. He's like, maybe 30 more minutes. Like, okay, that gave me enough. I didn't need to know how many more hills there were. At least I tried not to think about it and just enjoy myself and be present in the moment. But it's a small little example, but in this world, we're so addicted to schedules and routine and needing to know all the answers, or what the schedule is going to be, or what the plan is going to be like, what food is going to be available at the party. And just, we're not going to know. We're not going to know everything in life, and that's okay. Trying to put yourselves in relationships with people or in situations where you are challenged to be spontaneous, to go with the flow, and that things are outside of your control, I think is always a really, really good place to be for those of us who have struggled with this in our background. And I'm preaching to myself as much as I'm preaching to all of you in that. And I will say that is something, as a consistent practice, that is incredibly helpful. Second subpoint under when expecting challenges, how to be proactive, is cultivating a practice of gratitude. Also, much easier said than done. But how can we cultivate a heart of gratitude? Because we live in a very capitalistic society and a free market society, right? We're constantly bombarded with marketing and messages that tell us we're not thin enough, not pretty enough, don't have enough, don't make enough money, that don't have enough status, that there's always something better, there's more to achieve, there's more places to go, there's more person to be. You're not okay the way you are. If you just had this good or this experience or this body, then you would be happy. We're very discontent as a culture. And really, that's the way the economy runs. If you think about it, it runs on our discontent. Being being grateful and cultivating gratitude isn't really good for the economy, because then people wouldn't buy all the self-help books, and they wouldn't buy all of the thigh toning creams, and they wouldn't buy the diet plans, and they wouldn't buy the 5 more luxury cars. I mean, who at this point can afford 5 luxury cars? I don't know, but buy another luxury car or another home. There's just no end to it. So how do we cultivate gratitude? I have found it, especially in the last couple of weeks, by minimizing, number one, my time online. Number two, quiet, not turning on the television. I haven't watched television in maybe 2 or 3 weeks. Embracing quiet and stillness, taking time in nature. Being mindful, practicing mindfulness can be incredible for cultivating gratitude. Taking a second to look around and say, I have breath in my lungs and the sun is shining and I have 2 legs and I'm able to walk, unlike a lot of people in this world. I have eyesight. I can hear. I mean, the most basic things. Be grateful. Say thank you. If it's not to God, then just say thank you to your heart for recognizing them and appreciating them. And for me, I thank God. I'm looking and my dog is sleeping over there on the couch, and I'm thankful for her. Thankful for my family. I mean, thankful for all of the people who supported me in my recovery. I mean, I could go on and on and on and on. Thankful that I was born to an incredible family in a first world country rather than in the developing world or in a war-torn country where I was a persecuted religious minority. I mean, the list goes on and on and on of things that we can be grateful for. And yes, of course, we should never be grateful at the expense of and then suppressing negative emotions, but cultivating a practice of gratitude, whether it's mindfulness, getting out in nature, listening to music, journaling, whatever it is for you, how can you take time to truly be thankful? And I think that that helps prevent a lot of the discontent and the anxiety that comes from it, that our culture is just so maniacally pressuring us to feel literally every single day. And then the third subheading in, being proactive is to stay connected. And I mean this in 2 ways. One, in that I think it's really, really important to stay connected to your treatment team or professionals who are obviously experts in eating disorders. You might, your life might take you geographically somewhere else, away from your original treatment team, but wherever you go, make sure that you have access to a part of your treatment team or to someone who is knowledgeable in the field of eating disorders, so that if a challenge does arise, if you feel yourself sliding down into a pit or into a struggle, you have someone to call. Stay connected to a member of your treatment team or an expert, a clinician who can help you, a professional. This is so incredibly important. It doesn't mean that you're not recovered. It doesn't mean you're not strong. It doesn't mean that you're weak. It doesn't mean that you're a failure. It doesn't mean you're teetering on the brink of relapse. It doesn't mean any of those things. All it means that you're smart and you're taking care of yourself. Anyone and everyone who has struggled with an eating disorder and has been 2, 3, 5, 10, 20 years out of it knows that the way that you stay strong is knowing that you have that safety net there of people who support you and are looking out for you and want your best and know you and know the struggle you've been through. So stay connected to a professional, or at least have them on speed dial. Or I hate when I say that because nobody has speed dial anymore. Keep them in your favorites on your phone. Ask if they'll do Skype sessions, whatever it may be. Stay connected. Also, staying connected to your treatment team is super, super important, but also stay connected to other people. I know for me, isolation was a huge feeder of the lies of the eating disorder voice, and the behaviors. When we stay hidden, it's very, very easy to slip back into eating disorder tendencies, eating disorder thoughts, etc. So stay open, stay connected. Pick up the phone and actually talk to someone, not just text. Talk to someone on the phone that you love and care about. Push yourself to go to an event that you might not think, oh, I don't really want to go see those people. I don't really want to talk to this, whatever. I know I'm an introvert. There's a lot of times when I'd rather stay home. But force yourself to go, to stay connected. Even if you don't know who else is going to be there. You don't think you're going to have a great time. You might surprise yourself and have an amazing time, or see someone that you haven't seen in years, or have a wonderful experience, an illuminating conversation. You never know. But stay connected to people, to human beings, real blood, flesh and blood human beings, not just on social media. Get out from behind your Instagram stories and get out and have relationships with real people. Be vulnerable. Open yourself up to them, hear from them. Don't be afraid to maintain relationships, and do not isolate. Being in relationships is hard, but it's so worth it. It is so, so worth the struggle. So the 3 subpoints under expecting challenges and how to be proactive so that those challenges don't derail us: rejecting rigidity, practicing mindfulness or practicing gratitude, and staying connected. The last thing, and I'll end here, and I think this is really, really important, not only for people who are struggling, but also for their parents, their family, for those around them who are trying to support them through a difficult time. There's no shame. There's no shame allowed in the recovery process. And that is because everyone's journey to freedom, whatever that means for you and your family, is different. A lot of times we get into eating disorder behaviors because we're comparing ourselves to others. So why would we ever do so in the recovery process? When we break free from comparison and the very high, unrealistic standards that we set for ourselves and others, why would we set those same standards and set ourselves up for failure in the recovery journey? Why would we compare our own process to anyone else's? Your journey to freedom is yours alone. Now, of course, we all want to make sure, whether it's ourselves or a treatment team, want to make sure that someone does not continue in behaviors that potentially might lead to them taking their own life or dying of this disease, right? So in that sense, there is an urgency to recovery. But emotionally, spiritually, mentally, intellectually, physically, life is going to bring a lot of storms and a lot of challenges our way, which might lead to some really, really distressing times and a real temptation to revert to eating disorder behaviors. So don't feel shame when that happens. Acknowledge it. You've got the tools in your tool belt from good treatment, hopefully, and support from your family and friends. You've got this. When you're able to stay connected to your treatment team, to others that love you, when you're able to open up, when you're able to admit your vulnerability and weakness, you can stay true to long-lasting recovery. You can find it. You can do it. But do not allow yourself to feel shame. Try not to. I know it's much easier said than done, but there is no shame. Everyone's story and everyone's path looks different. Honor yours. The only way to full freedom and to long-lasting freedom is to honor your own authentic experience. It's not going to look like anyone else's. Everyone falls down. Everyone fails. Everyone breaks at some point. But it does not have to be the end of the road. In fact, it's just a little valley that leads to incredible and long-lasting freedom. Or freedom for a season until the next challenge comes. And those are the vicissitudes of life. And so I want to conclude by saying that it is an honor to share this with you, to share this walk with you. And I know that probably a lot of you who are listening right now are people who are in the midst of a struggle or are, in fact, on your own recovery journey. And I just want to thank you for your openness and listening. Thank you for letting me share my heart and insight with you. And I want to honor you and where you are. And hope that you will take some time after this. Jacqueline's going to come on and we're going to do a little bit more of Q&A. But I want you to leave and be able to reflect on these things that we talked about and to honor the place where you are in your journey right now, and to feel hopeful and be encouraged that it does get better, and that the hard work that you're doing right now in the recovery process is going to reap incredible dividends for you every single day in the rest of your life. I promise, because I've seen it happen in my own life and in so many others, that I can promise you that true freedom and long-lasting recovery is absolutely possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kirsten. That was so uplifting and so encouraging for all of us. I think the audience has some questions that they're very interested in asking you about. One is, have you ever been at a place where you felt so downtrodden, like just throwing in the towel? And how did you overcome it? I mean, what did you say to yourself? Why did you not just kind of give up?
Yeah, yes, I have many times. In my eating disorder, as well as after, just with regular life stuff. And this is a very, very difficult question. And I can say how I overcame the moment. That's not a prescription for how anyone else or everyone else should do it. First of all, I will say that time is everyone's best friend. In that, it continues to move forward. I think in our darkest times and in my darkest moments, I felt like I cannot get out of it fast enough, that moment needs to stop. It needs to end. That the panic or the anxiety or the frustration or the feeling like you just want to jump out of your skin because the pain, the internal pain is so intense, that moment will pass. It's just a moment. It might last 5 minutes, it might last 10 minutes. But in that very, very real experience, time is your best friend. So how can we pause? This has worked for me many, many times. Pause, close my eyes, take some deep breaths. I practice yoga, and so that has been very, very helpful for me in finding my breath again. Sometimes counting to 10, sometimes finding something else to bounce my thoughts to think about, not suppressing, but finding something else to think about in that moment. But in that moment, stepping back, breathing, counting to 10, whatever it is you need to do to center yourself, to pray until that moment passes. Because sometimes it's a very real, like very momentary thing. That's been my experience. For longer term kind of seasons of just absolute despair, the absolute most important thing is to find a professional, is to find a therapist. I cannot speak highly enough of, over the last 6 months of my life and going through, you know, the end of a really, really difficult relationship, I found the most incredible therapist, like literally life-saving therapist, psychologist, and she saved me. I mean, I don't know where I would be without her, and God, of course. But seeing her every week and being very, very open with her every week was absolutely essential to getting me through a very, very difficult season. But it's going to be different for everyone, you know? So what works for you, I think, is a really, really good question to ask yourself. But for me, just to get through that moment, it's really, really good to pause, step back, take a breath, and for me to pray or to meditate or be mindful in that moment, and knowing that it will pass. Sometimes you have to just take it like the next 5 seconds at a time, but knowing that time is your best friend in those situations.
Thank you, Kirsten. I was really touched by your response. I know the reason I became a therapist was from going through my eating disorder recovery process with the therapist. And I agree, she saved my life. She helped me change fundamental neurotransmitters. It's so worth finding the right therapist, and it's not always easy. So I would love it if you would just comment to folks about, you know, how to find the right therapist or how to know if they're a good fit, because I know that that is our first line of defense way before we ever go into official treatment. It's just to get a therapist or a nutritionist to work with.
Yeah, it's a lot easier said than done, for sure. But obviously, you know, there's a lot of difficulty with insurance. So a lot of times someone has to see, you know, who is an option of who their insurance is going to cover. And that can determine a lot of it. But going online and doing research obviously is one really great way to do it. I mean, obviously there's tons of incredible articles on eating disorder hope from, and you know, I've written blogs as a Timberline Knolls community relations specialist, and TK is a treatment center in Chicago. And there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of treatment options that one can find out about online at a place like Eating Disorder Hope. So, I mean, the internet can be your absolute best friend in that regard. However, it's really, really important to try out therapists as well. For the first time that I went to 2 until I found the right one. And went to a couple of different sessions. And just because someone is qualified, you might not necessarily gel with them. And so it's really important to do a trial period, and don't feel like you're going to offend them if you go to someone else. They're professionals. They're not going to be offended. I think that's really important, because a lot of us are people pleasers and say, oh, they're going to be offended, or they're going to feel bad, think I don't like them. They don't think that. Don't worry about it. But that's really, really important to find someone who is compatible with you personally. And then also just to know that you're going to probably need different therapists over different times in your life, and you're going to gel with different people during different seasons. So not being afraid to, it's like, this is a really shallow analogy, so forgive me, but like when you go to someone to do your hair for a really long time, and then you just realize you just, you know, you need a switch, or you want a different cut, or you're totally tired of the way you're doing it. Like, you have to find someone new to do your hair, and it can be hard because they were with you since you were 5, but you have to find a new one. So again, forgive this super shallow analogy, but that was the only one that was coming to my brain at the moment. But you're going to need different people during different seasons of your life, so not being afraid to pursue a new therapist at a different time in your life.
Here's another question for you from a mother of a daughter who's very interested in her beauty and image, feels a lot of pressure at school. How have you obtained such a centered, value-driven life when you're beautiful and have been receiving accolades for that? I would imagine all of your life.
Well, thank you for that question. You know, I think that people look, and I still look at people who I consider to be beautiful or more beautiful or physically attractive than I am. And I think a lot of us can look and say, well, how could they possibly ever feel bad about themselves or feel insecure? But the truth is, and I will say one really great thing about having been Miss America, being in a public position and then living in New York City and being on television all the time and meeting, I mean, just kinds of people that you wouldn't believe. I mean, people of notoriety and all of that, celebrity, and everyone has the same issues. Like, it doesn't matter if you're meeting the most beautiful person in the world, the most powerful person, President of the United States, or walking a red carpet at the Grammys or whatever, like, they all have the same issues. They're all super insecure, and they're all questioning themselves and comparing themselves to someone else and never satisfied. And you know what I think is a really, really great trend is you're seeing, especially on Instagram, like a lot of models and actresses and people who, you know, young girls do look up to online, not that they should, but they do, that are posting a lot of selfies and pictures with no makeup on, or, you know, showing their acne, or, you know, just being very open and very, very real, and also about their own feelings and saying how inadequate they feel, even as models. And I will tell you, I didn't feel uglier in my whole life than when I was Miss America. Why? Because I went from being just a normal girl from Farmington Hills, Michigan, and, you know, just being me in my community, in my town, in my city, to being supposedly this ideal, America's ideal, like ideal beauty. So that means when an institution or society has placed you on that pedestal, then that's the standard they judge you at. And so I had people all the time telling me or posting on me about line that I was not the ideal, that I was not that beautiful, that I did not deserve that accolade. And, you know, you're being held to this crazy, ridiculous, unrealistic standard. And so I felt horrible about myself. I felt hideously ugly. You know, I mean, and it's just, but I realized that I wasn't going to please everyone, that I was not going to ever meet up to someone's standard. And beauty is so fickle. I mean, people in Brazil think beauty is one thing, and people here in Switzerland think beauty is another. People in America think beauty is another. People in Japan think beauty is another. I mean, it is so diverse all over the world. And I'm sure a lot of you have seen that article from a while back where they created like a picture of Barbie basically, and asked graphic designers to from all around the world, countries all around the world, to photo edit the body into what their society's ideal was. And every country was completely different, from like Peru to Singapore to Australia to Germany to Russia to Zimbabwe to Canada. I mean, every single one was completely different. And it just goes to show that there is no one standard. And I think that all of us, the other thing I will say about that is how, you know, finding center is that I think we can all think about people in our lives who, if someone was to ask us, are they attractive? That you would not honestly be able to tell them objectively if that person was attractive, because you know them so well, and you know their spirit, and you know their personality and who they are as a person. And so to them, to you, they are beautiful. But you almost can't like remove their spirit from their body to be able to say whether they're objectively attractive, because their spirit shines so much more than just their physical attractiveness. And because of that, I go, wow, that shows me, yeah, my beauty is so much more about who I am on the inside rather than how much I weigh or what I look like or whether I have breakouts or a bad hair day or cellulite on my thighs. Like, most people don't care. Most people see the light that comes from here. And so I will say honestly that my experience as Miss America really grounded me, because I realized that I was never going to meet up to everyone's standards, and like, so what? I just couldn't care. I just really stopped caring. Yeah, and I also just realized that doing things and trying to pour out my life to others and to help inspire goodness and truth and compassion in this world was so much more fulfilling than caring about what I looked like. So that's a really long answer to a short question.
It's a great answer. I'm sorry about the bell in the background. My clock is deciding to go off right now. You know, Kirsten, when you were talking about the beauty within and how we don't even see that after a while in people when their soul is sort of emanating so beautifully, I was laughing to myself because I have this Italian, or had, she passed away, Italian grandmother. And she, you know, she was short and she was overweight, and she'd had one boob removed back with breast cancer years ago where they just took like half your side off. Yeah. And she had just had some of her teeth ripped out and teeth put in, and I was sitting by her bed and we were just laughing and laughing, and because all of her beauty had been taken away in her estimation, but she was so loved, and it was such a strong spirit of hope and beauty. I didn't even see that. I mean, and her light still is with me. I feel like we pass that on. And I love that you're emphasizing that, particularly to young people, because they so need that message that their inner value is based on their character and the beauty of their soul rather than their appearance. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, we really appreciated having you. If your question was not addressed, we will forward these to Kirsten and ask her to respond. We're hoping and talking with Kirsten about doing much more with her over the next year, because she is phenomenal and we all need her in our lives. So stay tuned.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you, Kirsten. Take care. Bye-bye.